So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory. Long Island's news alternative to the Newsday Cablevision news monopoly. With Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. We're filming at Cablevision Studios here in Hauppauge, New York. This next story may actually change your life. It'll change the way you feel about the judicial system, about the death penalty. I know when I first heard this story and met my next guest, I know it changed my life. My next guest, Jeffrey Deskovic, spent 16 years in jail for a murder and a rape that he did not commit. This is an incredible story. What's equally incredible is what Jeffrey is doing now, trying to make sure that he changes the system, that this doesn't happen to anybody else, and God forbid if this does happen to people, which he's going to tell us that it happens to possibly over 10% of the people in jail are in there for crimes that he doesn't commit. And he's dedicated his life since he's been out of prison to try to exonerate people who are in jail unlawfully. Jeffrey Deskovic, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've been out for a couple of years now, so you sort of honed the story because I know you've used public speak a lot and you tell the story a lot. So I'm going to sort of let you take over because you really know, all the detail and how to get it all in. But tell us, when did the story start?
Back in November 1989.
Okay.
Which is when the victim, who was a high school classmate of mine, her body was found murdered and raped in a park in Peekskill, New York, which is Westchester County, not too far from here.
Okay. Did you know this girl?
Barely. She was a classmate in two of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was the extent of it. We really weren't even on a high-buy basis.
Right. Hey, you ever been in trouble with the law?
Absolutely not, no.
So you weren't one of these troubled kids that was constantly getting arrested? And were you violent?
No, I was not violent either, no.
So what made them pick Jeffrey Deskovic out of everybody in Peekskill, New York? How do they pick you out and arrest you?
Well, the police story is that some of the kids in the high school that they interviewed told the police that they might want to speak to me because I was quiet and to myself, so I didn't really fit in. I mean, I kind of lived a double life as a kid. I mean, after school in the apartment complex where I grew up, I was like the life of the party, but in school it was a different set of kids, so I was really quiet, withdrawn to myself. So that being strange is what the police said initially attracted them to me.
Okay.
The other factor which they said attracted them to me, they said I was overly upset at the victim having been murdered, which it did emotionally affect me. That was really my first brush with death. But then again, this really emotionally affected everybody in the city of Peekskill. There hadn't been a murder there for like 20 years, so even the city even offered free mental health services to anybody who wanted them.
I would imagine you would be scared too, because there's a murderer.
Of course, yeah. Well, yeah. That's another important point. There was a lot of public pressure on the police. I mean, the city of Peekskill literally came to a stop. I mean, parents were coming to the high school, picking their kids up from school, bringing them directly home. I mean, there was town hall meetings. What are the safety tips? How's the police investigation going? So, having honed in on me for about 6 weeks, the cops played this cat and mouse game with me. Half the time they would talk to me as if I was a suspect. The other half the time they would talk to me as if they needed my help to solve the crime. So they would say things like, kids won't talk freely around us, they will around you. Let us know if you hear any rumors. Stop in from time to time. They'd ask me opinion questions and congratulate me on my opinion. They made me feel important. As a youth, my fantasy career was to be a police officer. So this unexpected early opportunity to do quasi-police work kind of fed into my believing this fiction. And the other factor was that I came from a single-parent household, so my father was really never involved in my life. So this officer who was pretending to be my friend, I began to look up to him. Like a role model, I began to look up to him, yes.
And you may have also fit that model of somebody who would do something like this, not having a father in the household.
Yeah, there was a profile that the Peekskill police got from a psychological profile from the NYPD, and I happened to fit this psychological profile. So eventually the cops got me to agree to take a polygraph test. Look, there's some new information we want to share with you. We want you to take and pass a polygraph test first. So it help us to help you to help us type of pretzel logic.
Did you have a lawyer, Jeff?
No, I did not have a lawyer. So the next day on the school day, I went to the police station And they drove me out of Peekskill, out of Westchester County, to the city of Brewster, which is in Putnam County. Most people, to your point, in New York, if you're 16 years old, you're considered to be an adult for purposes of being able to waive your rights and speak to the police without a lawyer and without parents.
Okay.
So there were 3 officers there who I knew were police officers. Then there was the polygraphist, who was the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator. He was pretending not to be a cop.
Okay.
So they didn't give me anything to eat. The entire time I was there, they put me in a small room and attached me to the polygraph.
You weren't
machine.
arrested at this point.
I was not
They were still
arrested.
just questioning you.
They were still just.
So they don't
questioning
read you
me.
rights, or do they read you rights or no? They
read me rights in the car, but I never understood why they were reading
16.
them.
I wouldn't even think you would.
Yeah,
even
every time they would get to the part where it said if you can't, that if there's anything you can say, you will say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I would always think to myself, court? What court? What are you talking about? We're not going to court.
Right, and you're 16. I mean, let's keep in mind,
Yes.
and we'll show the picture on the screen. You know, you're 16 years old. You
Yes.
know, I mean, we're looking at a grown man now. So, but a 16-year-old, and to your own admission, you were a little bit awkward and shy
Yes.
to yourself. Okay.
Absolutely. So I'm in a small room, and after giving me all these cups of coffee, the purpose of which was to get me nervous.
Really?
Sure. Then
A 16-year-old. Who even gives a 16-year-old?
a cup
bunch
of
of
coffee.
cup of coffee. What do you
Yeah.
think of
Well,
that?
as soon as this guy became a virtual coffee dispenser. No sooner did I finish a cup and put
Wow.
it down, he's got the thing in hand, half poured up. You want another one? And he
That's
kept
not
that
normal,
up.
unless they're doing it for a reason.
Well, that's my
Why not
point.
give you water?
This is my point, Gary. It was to get me nervous. See, the premise of the polygraph is that when you tell a lie, you'll become nervous, and the nervousness will result in an increased pulse rate. It's the pulse rate that's measured by the machine,
Wow.
but other factors which will lead to an increased pulse rate are fear and caffeine. So
Right.
the caffeine
Wow.
is part of the setup.
Especially if you're not used to drinking that much coffee.
Right, and which I clearly was not
Right.
at that age. So after finishing up his coffee routine, the polygraphist, he launches into this third-degree interrogation. So he invades my personal space. He raises his voice at me. He keeps asking me the same questions over and over again. And he keeps this up for 6.5 to 7 hours.
Wow.
Each hour goes by, I'm getting more and more frightened. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the polygraph test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." So that really shoots my fear through the roof.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then the officer who's pretending to be my friend, he comes in the room and tells me that the other officers are going to harm me, but that he's holding them off, but can't do so indefinitely. That
Were they
I have to help
videotaping
myself.
this?
No, that's the thing. They were not videotaping it. They weren't audio taping it. There's no signed confession. It's just the cop's word as against mine.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why we'll talk about later. I advocate for videotaping interrogations.
Right.
So he basically threatens. He tells me that he's been holding these other officers off from harming me, but that he can't do that anymore. Then he tells me that if
You must have been petrified.
I was petrified. I mean, the way they were conducting themselves. I mean, these are grown men. I'm 16 years old. Again, you can see the picture up on the screen, weighing about 150 pounds. I'm really frightened. I'm in fear of my life. I mean, I'm really painfully aware. I don't know where I'm at. I know that nobody else knows where I'm at. And then he throws me this false life preserver by telling me, look, just tell them what they want to hear. They'll stop what they're doing. You're not going to be arrested. Being young, naive, frightened, in fear, as I've described, totally overwhelmed psychologically and emotionally, I made up a story based on information which they had given me in the
They
course
fed
of
you through
interrogation.
right.
And by their own testimony, by the end, I was on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. And I was, in fact, arrested for a murder and rape. Ultimately, I was wrongfully convicted of that crime.
So you were convicted and you go to trial.
I went to trial. I went to trial.
And did you for a lawyer I had
a public defender who he didn't defend me, basically. You know, I had an alibi. He never presented it.
Wow.
He didn't allow me to take the stand. He didn't cross-examine the medical examiner. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. So there was semen.
So go
found.
about the DNA, because there was DNA in your case.
There was. Semen was found in the victim, which
Because the girl was
did not
raped
match me.
and murdered.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, and there was DNA.
Yes, and that didn't match me.
Now, how did they explain this?
Sure, the prosecutor got the medical examiner to
He must have been
commit fraud.
disappointed.
Yeah, he was, but he was an evil genius, though, because what he did was he got the medical examiner to commit fraud and claim that he found medical evidence to show that this victim had been sexually active. Meanwhile, she had been living a really sheltered life.
Right.
So he fabricates these findings, which opens up the door for the prosecutor to argue, well, the semen could have come from consensual sex. So it
With
didn't
somebody
matter.
else,
With somebody
so
else. So it didn't matter. It doesn't matter that the DNA didn't come from
And you would think they would know if she was forcibly, raped or not, or if it was consensual. I would think a medical examiner
Right.
could know, and even still, they could find. Did your lawyer try to find out, or did anybody
Well, that's
try
the
to
whole
find out who
point.
the person was who had consensual sex?
Well, the
Because that would explain it.
the prosecutor named another youth by name that he claimed that had this encounter with the victim, but he never proved that. He never produced him as a witness. He didn't do DNA testing. No, nothing. He just made unsupported arguments.
Because he knew it probably wouldn't match.
Right, and this is where my lawyer failed me, because he was supposed to discredit that medical examiner through cross-examination, except he never asked him a single question.
Wow.
And then he wasn't able to insist on DNA testing because of a conflict of interest, in that this other youth the prosecutor was falsely claiming had this encounter with the victim was represented by another member of Legal Aid Society, and in fact the lawyer was supposed to be supervising him on my case.
Wow.
So add it all up, I was wrongfully convicted.
So do you feel like that your attorney was sort of in on this whole plot, that he was representing you, but he was in on
Yes.
this whole conspiracy because of the pressure? And maybe in their own mind, do you think that they believed that you were the murderer and they just wanted to build this story around it? Or do you think that they didn't believe? Because if you weren't the murderer and they convicted you, there's going to be a murderer out there. So
Right.
do you think they really believed that it was you and just wanted to make sure that they convicted you? What do you think?
No, I don't.
Looking back.
Yeah, looking back, I don't believe it was a good faith error, because the bottom of that argument drops out when you think about when the DNA didn't match me. They were supposed to stop the case right there. They know the very questionable circumstances under which they obtained this so-called confession. And then after the DNA didn't match me, the police went back out into the field. They interviewed 19 witnesses who knew the victim in different capacities, and they all told the police that there was no boyfriend, there was no consensual sex. The police never documented those interviews, and therefore never turned it
Right.
over to my
Discovery.
attorneys. Right, exactly. And in terms of my public defender, to come back to that, he had a solid reputation as being the best trial lawyer in legal aid.
He's probably never done murder, though, had he?
Well, I don't know what his exact record is, but he's supposed to be and they're all shocked at his performance. So it kind of suggests that he threw the case.
Right. Wow, that's crazy. So I just want to go back to the fact that this sort of like a conspiracy to convict somebody. So they really had pressure, you believe, to convict you. They knew it wasn't you, but they just wanted to get somebody.
Right. This was a perfect
convicted.
storm here. So you got the cops who coerced the confession with the polygraphers who helped them. There's a prosecutor with his misconduct. There's a fraud on the medical examiner. Right. Then you have my public defender. And then meanwhile, the judge really didn't want to go against the grain either. He really wasn't acting as a neutral judge. And the reason why I say that is because at the sentencing hearing, where I begged him to overturn the verdict, and I referenced the DNA, he actually told me on the record, maybe you are innocent.
Wow.
Conceding there's a doubt.
Right.
He could have,
Nullified the jury.
he could have overturned the conviction. He could have cited any one of his questionable rulings. But then also the other thing too is that when we hadn't decided if we were going to have a bench trial, which is decided by a judge or a jury, he came to my lawyer. My lawyer told me that he came to him and told him, "Look, pick a jury. I don't want to be responsible for finding you not guilty."
Wow. So there was pressure. He knew there was pressure.
Sure.
But I think don't you think the judge can sway the jury, though?
Absolutely. With their rulings, they can certainly sway the jury.
And even by their attitude.
Even their attitude and demeanor.
Right.
Yeah, so no, I don't consider really that I had a fair trial. Ultimately, I lost all 7 of my appeals.
Well, let's just go. So now you get convicted, and we'll show the picture on the screen. Again, just to show that this is a 16-year-old.
And does that look like the picture of somebody who's capable of performing
and
a
obviously,
murder and rape?
Since now we're looking back that you didn't do it, there was never any physical evidence that you did it. So you were convicted of a murder without one stitch of physical evidence.
Correct.
Everything was circumstantial.
Everything was just this coerced false confession.
So basically,
under really questionable circumstances.
So you think everybody just went with the fact that who would confess to a crime they didn't commit?
Yes.
And not knowing all this other stuff that they told you, you would think, you could say, all right, well, maybe the jury, you could see why they would believe that, and everybody's believing that you did it.
Yeah, except with the caveat though. Again, I mean, look at the red flags. You're talking about a 16-year-old driven out of county, right? And then come on, a 6.5 to 7 hour. Yes,
this came up to the jury knew about
this.
Yes,
a 6.5 to 7 hour interrogation. That by itself is really outside of the norms of polygraphs. You're not supposed to, absolute max from the expert literature, you were supposed to have someone attached to a polygraph machine would be 3 hours.
Wow,
so here they make more than double. Yes.
And then a 16-year-old, the coffee and the threatening.
And then there's the DNA.
Right.
which doesn't match me. And I'll tell you this one other thing. The jury has a hand in this too, morally. In terms of how I see it, because when I was exonerated, we'll get to that later. But one of the jurors contacted my civil rights lawyer and told my lawyer, we saw Jeff has been released, he's been exonerated, he's pursuing this lawsuit now. We're really glad he's free. I'm really glad he's free.
Why would you be glad he's free if he's a murderer?
Because I never thought he was guilty.
That's just cruel.
And my lawyer asked him the obvious question,
Right,
Gary.
why'd you vote?
Vote that way?
And what did he say?
He said, well, look, at that point, it was 11-1. I was the last juror. We had sent a note out to the jury asking, sent a note out to the judge asking if we didn't come up with a verdict, would we be sequestered over the Christmas holiday? And the answer was yes. So all the jurors were pressuring me because they didn't want to be sequestered over the holiday. They wanted to just get out of there, go home to their family, and I caved into the pressure.
And I got to say that, anybody who's watching that who's going to be a juror, look at what that decision did. I mean, you have to take this very seriously. And if you're a juror and if you're the only one, but you believe that the person didn't do it, for God's sake, stick to your guns and don't do it. I mean, this is a perfect example. That one person could have prevented
the
this
wrongful conviction,
whole
ultimately
tragedy.
to 16. Yeah, because ultimately that switching of votes cost me 16 years.
So you were convicted. You were convicted. And what was your sentence?
15 to life.
15 to life.
Which, by the way, because I was charged as an adult, I was sent to a men's maximum security prison where I was housed.
You must have been petrified.
I was.
I can't.
I was 17 years old. I mean, here's a picture of me on the screen, a very early visit. You see how, look, let's be for real. What am I going to do, physically, to defend myself against a fully grown man, right? Who, many of whom were guilty of having committed serious violent crimes.
Right. And also because it was a child, in prison.
Anyone convicted
if they
of
find
a sex
out that you're a sex offender, aren't you?
Yeah, you're a target, right? Absolutely. So there were times I was physically assaulted. One time in which I nearly lost my life.
Right. So tell us about. We're going to get to some of the appeals, but just tell us about what it was like going to jail and some of your experiences in prison. You were sent upstate to.
I was sent to Elmira. I was initially went to Fishkill, which is our reception center. Then I was sent to Elmira Correctional Facility, which had a reputation, by the way, as a junior gladiator school.
Okay, so this wasn't a country club prison?
Absolutely not. Gary, there was like 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day, plenty of gang activity, a lot of other violence that didn't involve weapons. There was something happening every day. There was a lot of inmate violence. The guards themselves were very verbally abusive. Common decency and respect were things that could not be taken for granted. Food was terrible. Often it was either burned or not full or not fully cooked. The same items would appear on the menu 4 or 5 times.
Wow. So what else do you have to tell us about the experience in prison? I can't imagine going in. You never. I guess you went in. There was no cell phones, no Facebook, and
absolutely no.
You never had a girlfriend,
no,
right?
I didn't.
Because
I did
it wasn't
not.
a real girlfriend. So you went in.
But I want to also, since we're talking about things that I miss, and you talked about some of the technological aspects, let me get to some of the other aspects.
Okay.
So I miss births, deaths, weddings. I didn't get to go to the high school prom. I did not graduate high school. I didn't
driver's license?
Right. Didn't complete the driver's license. Didn't finish my college education at a more traditional age. I wasn't started on a career. I didn't have a chance to start a family. I didn't go through the rites of passage at a normal age that normally would have taken place.
Right. Now, what about your family? How did that work? Did they all stick behind you? Did they visit you? I don't know. I guess you were far away. I don't know how often they can, but
yeah, the only one that came to see me really was really my mother, my grandmother. It was about 3.5 to 4.5 hours from Peekskill to Elmira. So those two used to come to see me, but then in '96, my grandmother passed away while I was incarcerated.
Did you get to go? I think there was something that gave you a choice between
the funeral or seeing her alive in a coma in a hospital. Right. So I had to choose there, and I wound up choosing to see her while she was alive, yet in a coma. But that was a very humiliating situation because they had me in handcuffs and a chain around my waist and my legs fastened together, and they parked the car far away from the hospital doors, so to parade me through there and in the hospital corridor like that. It was like I'm some kind of violent animal. Right. So that was very humiliating. The prison administration tried to force me to take a sex offender training program, which would have involved my admitting guilt to the instructor, the other prisoners. I would have had to give details of committing the crime.
Which you didn't do. You already had to do. You learned your lesson at that point.
Right, but here's the kicker, right? Is if you don't do all that, as well as put it in writing, by the way, which you're not saying you're guilty, and I want the details. It's going to be on writing,
which you'd have to make up because it's not true.
Right? And if you refuse, they'll remove you from the program and deem you to have refused to complete the program.
Which means you can't get.
Which means it's another black. It's a black mark. It's against you when you go to the parole board. And
so what do you do? I mean, you're sitting in your. Did you ever say, you know what, maybe I will just say what they want to hear and I'll get a chance of getting out on parole?
I thought about it.
I'm sure you had plenty of time to think.
I had plenty of time to think. Yeah, I did. I did think about that, but
who knows what we would do in that. You have to be a horrible decision.
It was a horrible decision, and that's one of the things that I'm against. I mean, wrongful convictions do happen. In the end, I decided not to do it because I already had this terrible experience as a result of doing it. Right. So I just made the decision up. I was, no matter even if it cost me. The rest of my life. So I guess that's just what it is.
Were you prepared to spend the rest of your life in jail?
Yes and no. I mean, I wasn't going to switch what I said, but honestly, I was pretty much at the end of my rope at the end, and so suicide was a definite possibility in my mind that just loomed larger and larger as more and more time passed by. I mean,
but you had hope, though, right? I mean, with appeals. I mean, you had to think that, somebody's going to look at my case, right?
That's how I got through my first 11 years. But then, my appeals were up in 2001, and nobody answered my letters for 4 years looking for help, because once your appeals are over, they don't provide you with an attorney anymore. And then I got turned down for parole as well.
Now, let me ask you, in your appeals, I'm sure you.
Yes.
I mean, you had to write. Hey,
I was raising the issue of my innocence on the.
There's no proof.
That was a centerpiece of it.
Right.
Yes.
And what do they write back in?
They wrote back in their opinion.
Answer?
They wrote back in their opinion, the appellate division, that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which doesn't make any sense.
Of course,
they didn't have any. They didn't have any.
Right.
So from that point
do you think anybody read it, Jeff? I mean, I've seen people do appeals in New York State, and to me, they don't read it.
No,
it's a rubber stamp.
It's a rubber stamp. That's a big part of the problem of wrongful conviction.
To me, it's a pre-printed form that they fill out. Maybe there's a little bit more that goes into it, but from what I've seen, a few appeals, and it's just a pre-printed thing, or the judge used their discretion, or the jury did it, whatever, and they just blow off.
That's what it was. And to tell you, as terrible as that first ruling is, it only got worse for me the rest of the way
because
up.
Maybe they followed the other.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I lost on technical grounds after that, right? So the appellate court denied the motion to re-argue. Then the Court of Appeals declined to give me permission to appeal to them. The federal court ruled that my being late 4 days was more important than the fact I was arguing I was innocent, because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong information on filing procedure. Wow. Then the next three courts, including the U.S. Court of Appeals, where Sonia Sotomayor was a judge, they all upheld that ruling, and so all my appeals were finished.
Wow. I mean, how frustrating. You must have faith in the system and say, you know what, at least somebody's going to look at this.
Yeah, exactly. It was very frustrating.
I mean, you just had to be like, I can't believe this is happening. What we're going to do is, because we still have a lot of the story to go, so what I think we're going to do is we're going to take a break here, then we're going to do a follow-up show on this, which will air next week, where we talk about it, because I do want to talk about what you've been doing since you got out. So anybody's watching the show, watch the next segment.
It does get better for me.
It does get better because Jeff's sitting here smiling. But let me talk about the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation and how people can get involved. The foundation seeks to exonerate the actual innocent people. For example, prisoners who have no connection to the crime for which they were convicted. Their team of investigators and lawyers comprehensively review court files, transcripts of prior testimony and evidence introduced to trial to uncover investigative leads, possible alternative suspects, exculpatory evidence, and similar crimes in the area. In addition, they examine whether flaws in the trial process cause a wrongful conviction, such as the use of junk science, expert witnesses without proper credentials, prosecutorial misconduct, such as withholding exculpatory evidence, laboratory errors, false confessions, misleading identification procedures, and the like. Pretty much everything that happened in your case. Finally, they re-interview the witnesses who previously testified and witnesses not yet heard from, and where appropriate, identify evidence for forensic testing and retesting. I think that's important, so people watching it don't think that you're one of these organizations who will get somebody out on a technicality that maybe committed the crime. And I know you're committed to people who you are comfortable
are innocent,
are absolutely innocent.
Absolutely. Just to build on your point, we only go into court and argue that somebody is innocent. We do not go in there and argue a technicality or a point of law. that has its place at the pure defense
Well,
bar.
just
That's
something
not
else.
us.
Right, that's not. And if somebody wants to get involved, how do they get involved? I'm sure you can use donations, and I know you put in a lot of your own money.
I did.
But if somebody else wants to put a donation, how
They
do
can
they
go
do
to
that?
they can go to our website, very easy to remember, deskovic.org. That's deskovic.org.
And you're also on Facebook, which
We
they
are
can
on
reach you on
Facebook.
there.
We can reach us on there. By the way, we have social media. We have really good articles which are posted throughout the week on wrongful conviction, as well as articles on other general criminal justice reform.
And I know you
follow us on Twitter as well.
Okay, and I know you also do public speaking, which
Yes.
is not only a way to raise a little bit of money for your organization, but also to spread public awareness. I'm Gary Jacobs. Thank you for joining us at Long Island Backstory. And again, like us on Facebook, go to Long Island Backstory. You can find all of our shows on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning, 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash, 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.